Hello, and you're all very welcome along to yet another episode of the GAA Statsman podcast. I'm your host, Matt Hurley, and it's a cracker of a show today where I'm joined here by Aaron Prendergast from GAA Fan TV, and we're going to discuss all the football action this weekend, all the All-Ireland Senior Football Championship games on, Tailteann Cup. Every county are involved except for Kilkenny this weekend, so it's absolutely going to be manic, and New York are the other team not involved, but that is so manic weekend. And we'll also touch on the minor hurling championship and under 20 hurling championship double header in Thurles on Sunday as well, between Clare and Galway and Cork and Offaly respectively. So load of action this weekend, Aaron, and are you ready for it?
Yeah, no, there's a whole host of action, all right, like between football and underage hurling, as you said, like 16 games in the football championship. Like that's a huge amount of games. Like I think Saturday there's basically 4 games in a row. So yeah, it's definitely, it'd be nice maybe if we could have a weekend where the weather isn't nice, just because probably unless people are at the games or going to the games, you're probably going to miss maybe the good weather or whatever. But yeah, like there's a lot of cracking games, and thanks very much for having me on.
No bother at all, and delighted to get into the action. And before we get into the action, of course, we did this with Seamus last week. We'll do a segment as well this week, Week of the G. And to be honest, there's only one headline, and it actually turned up today that Clare and Limerick, the Munster hurling final, which was confirmed to be the fixture last weekend, that game sold out in the Gaelic grounds earlier on today, and there's a lot of unhappy Clare and Limerick fans over this, saying that the Ticketmaster website didn't work, and there was more controversy earlier on in the week. Originally, Limerick wanted the game played in Pairc. Then Clare said, no, we'll play it in the Gaelic grounds. They're playing in the Gaelic grounds, which is essentially Limerick's home venue, so it's very brave of Clare to do that in fairness. But tickets sold out now, and there was a lot of fans unhappy, saying there was a lot of bandwagoners going to the stadium to watch the game in the Munster final. And as Buff Egan would describe it, people that apparently wouldn't differentiate a hurley from a brush. So it's some controversial opinions there. What do you think of it all, Aaron? Like sold out within 2 hours?
Yeah, like I think Ticketmaster in general is just a bit of a mess. Like I think because I remember trying to get tickets for the Katie Taylor fight, a few other things as well. Like, and I don't know, it's like when there's too many people on Ticketmaster, it just freezes and doesn't work, and it's a very annoying platform to use, because even when you're buying tickets, it gives you a limit. Like I think you've got 5 minutes after you go and actually like to choose your seat, and then obviously go and everything. Like you have to come prepared. Do you know what I mean? Like you have to come prepared for Ticketmaster, in fairness. And as you said there, like I think it's very disappointing for Clare and Limerick fans. Like I was actually looking into going to it myself, would you believe? But I was sort of saying, I'll wait until the tickets go up. I don't want to be stealing any tickets off any passionate Clare or Limerick fans. So I'll just wait for the tickets to go on sale. And then after a while, maybe we'll see if there's any there. But probably unlikely now, in fairness, with the way things are looking. So, yeah, like it's very unfortunate for Clare and Limerick fans. Like, again, it's surprising that the stadium is in the Gaelic grounds. And it's surprising that they haven't gone with Pairc. Like, just looking at the capacity of the Gaelic ground, I think it's 49,000. What's the capacity of Pairc? 53, 54, is it?
That's a max attendance, really. And I was hearing the Gaelic grounds max of 44. Like it was packed to the rafters for Cork and Limerick last weekend, and it was something like 42,000. So I would imagine 45 is the max there. Pairc and push probably 48. But I think the problem for Clare fans is Pairc is way too far down for them, especially. And the problem, and I'll go to Pairc loads of times, I will do so on Saturday for the Cork and Kerry game as well. The problem is the parking, really. You can't really park in stadiums. There's no bus shuttles going into the stadiums either. That's a huge problem for Clare and Limerick fans. But what I'd be questioning of the Munster Council, why aren't you playing in Thurles? It's a neutral venue. It suits both counties. I actually don't get why Thurles wasn't an option here. I don't know what you think about that yourself.
Yeah, no, absolutely, because I think that's where it was held last year, wasn't it, for last year's final? So, yeah, I don't really understand why it's not, like, and I don't really know. Like, it does seem a little unfair, like with Limerick having the home advantage, like in the Gaelic grounds. I know, like, it's an equal pair of fans that will go to the game, but it does seem quite unfair ever so slightly on Clare fans. Like, I don't know how it works in Munster, whether in it's a home and away rule or something of that nature. Maybe that's why Limerick are getting it in the Gaelic grounds. But it's a little bit surprising, like, because Pairc was definitely the front runner. You think like that would make a lot of sense for both teams, neutral stadium. But for whatever reason, it hasn't happened, and the Gaelic Grounds is the one that they've gone with. But as you said, like Semple Stadium would have been perfect. It would have been the perfect occasion for both of those two sets of supporters. And instead, it's in the Gaelic Grounds, which very much favours Limerick. And to think like Limerick were at one stage during that Cork game, they were possibly going out of the championship altogether. Now they've got a Munster final in their own backyard to look forward to. Like it's mad what can happen in so quickly. But look, Clare will relish it. They beat Limerick already in the Gaelic Grounds once this year. No reason why they can't do it again. So I think like for Clare, I don't think it will phase the team or the players. Might be less supporters maybe, and it might be maybe a little bit more, I suppose, annoying from a Clare perspective. But in terms of the game itself, like you could argue they're even going in as favourites possibly.
Maybe so, because they've absolutely performed excellent this year, and more so they've had very good games rather than Limerick this season. But obviously that's for another few weeks in the podcast. But it is unfortunate that they can't play in Thurles or Páirc Uí Chaoimh, and unfortunately it is the Gaelic Grounds. Maybe it's suited Clare, maybe it won't, but we'll have to see in the next few weeks. But we will get into the football action this weekend, and the first game is a bit of a rivalry. Well, it was a rivalry back in the day, but kind of died a death a small bit, as epitomised by Ciaran McCarthy at the Southern Star this week, interviewing a group of fans this week. And make sure you buy that if you haven't already. This Thursday, Cork against Kerry, 3 o'clock on Saturday on GAA Go. Obviously, I was on the Southern Star podcast. We discussed the Cork and Kerry game in detail, how Cork could counteract Kerry and all that. David Clifford, Sean O'Shea, Kerry's kickouts and all that. Check it out if you haven't already. So I've given my views on the Cork Kerry game, just to kick out, to push up on them. That's what Cork need to do. But what's your views, Aaron? Do you think this will be a competitive game? Like Ciaran McCarthy was actually saying on the same podcast that Cork could attack Kerry by using their runners, Rory Dean, Sean Powder, Brian Hurley, Stephen Sherlock if he plays. So could that be an avenue where Kerry struggled? It did work for Mayo against them in Killarney after all.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Like, I think there's two schools of thought for Cork. Like, I think, as you said, like, you attack from the front foot. Like, Kerry are probably a little bit vulnerable at the minute. You push up in on them, get good ball, good quality service into the likes of Brian Hurley and a few of those other lads. Like, there's that sort of school of thought. And maybe there's the other school of thought that, like, if Cork do go toe-to-toe with Kerry and Kerry bring their A game, Kerry could blow them away completely and put them away by half-time and be possibly 10 points up, possibly more. That's if Kerry are at it. Now, obviously, Kerry haven't really looked at their best, but you'd imagine there would be a response or a response after that defeat to Mayo. Like, they were very flat. David Clifford brought his A game, in fairness. Paddy and Sean O'Shea were a little bit quiet. Paul Gainey, like, to be fair, he's still looking very good, but he hasn't had a lot of game time so far this year. And then the other fringe players like Tony Brosnan, Killian Spillane wasn't on the bench the last day. They do lack a lot of options. I think their midfield is quite weak as well. I think they're definitely missing the influence of David Moran. I think Jack Barry, good player, but I don't know if he's a midfielder though. He looks more like a half forward or possibly a wing back. He doesn't look like a midfielder in my opinion. So that's the problem that Kerry possesses, that they don't have much sort of strength around the middle. And then defensively as well, they've been cut open at times this year. They've conceded goals in a lot of their matches they've played. So Cork will fancy their chances. I think maybe for the opening 10-15 minutes, Cork should go at Kerry and really try and put them under pressure early on, obviously with the game, I suppose, being at home as well. So I think it's a huge opportunity for Cork, but I think there has to be, at the same time, an era or an aura of sort of conservatism about Cork, because if Kerry do start strong and if they do build up a lead and go 6-7 up, let's say, maybe come out in the second half and just hold what you have, because like Cork, like they're going to get through this group anyway, because Louth are not going to take out from Mayo and Kerry, in my opinion. So I think from a Cork perspective, after that, it's just consolidation and try get beat as less as you possibly can against both Kerry and Mayo, so that you go into that preliminary quarter final, I suppose, with a bit more confidence. But yeah, like there's no reason why Cork can't challenge Kerry. We've seen what they did to Dublin earlier in the league. We see what some of their players do possess, and some of the strengths and qualities. Like I think Ian Maguire, if he's playing, I think he's more than capable to hold the fort around midfield. It's an interesting one with Cork, because this is the type of game they will raise, they will get up for. It's just if they have a bad start and Kerry start strong, I would worry a little bit for Cork. But it'll be an interesting one because it's one of them, like which version of Cork will turn up, which version of Kerry will turn up. We don't exactly know, to be honest with you. But Cork are bound to be confident after, a difficult trip to Pairc Tailteann and beating Louth. And that was a tough game for them, and a game where the going got tough at times, and then they were able to steady on and soldier on through. So, yeah, like you'd fancy Kerry, but at the same time, I don't think it's a foregone conclusion, and I do fancy Cork to pose a couple of problems for the Kingdom on Saturday.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll hope that Cork provide a challenge anyway. Just a comment coming in here in regards to another podcast. Did you watch Play on GAA with Seamus Brady and Sinead Farr? Yeah, as a matter of fact, I did this morning, and it was a very good podcast actually. Seamus has a very good podcast on Play on GAA over there. So you check that out, see if you haven't already. So yeah, that's a very good podcast there. But before we leave the Cork and Kerry game, because I think we're both predicting a Kerry win, for Kerry to go on and win the All-Ireland, because I think I've talked enough about Cork and this podcast and the Star podcast in general, but for Kerry, what I thought out of the Mayo game, I don't know what you think of yourself, Aaron, but other than Shane Ryan and David Clifford, Kerry don't have much. Like Shane Ryan stopped, I'd say, certain 4 goals in that game. Eventually, Owen McLaughlin broke that stranglehold. Clifford himself was scoring from ridiculous angles. He scored 8 points, and he was scoring near the 45-metre line or beyond that. So, is there a question that Kerry players need to step up more, like Sean O'Shea, Darragh Moynihan, and all them players, for Kerry to retain the All-Ireland? Or do you think I'm completely bonkers, and do you think there's more players to Clifford and Ryan?
Yeah, I think they definitely do need to step up. Like I think so far, well, on the basis of that game anyway, and on the basis of a lot of the league, obviously Clifford came back a little bit later on. But you looked at some of Kerry's form, obviously without Clifford, they weren't too great in fairness. Like they lost a good couple of away games last season in fairness. So yeah, like I think they obviously will need Sean O'Shea to come into form, Paul Gainey, Paudie Clifford. Like they're more than capable of definitely challenging. Like I think the depth in their squad is definitely a lot weaker so far this year, especially with Killian Spillane just not really around the panel. Adrian Spillane was usually a good option off the bench. He doesn't quite seem to be around so far. You think back to the last couple of years, like they've lost the likes of Tommy Walsh as well and James O'Donoghue. Like they have lost a lot of attacking talent. And then around midfield, David Moran's not there. Like midfield just is an issue. And I'd wonder why someone like Stefan O'Cumber doesn't play. I don't know if it's an injury or what the scenario is there, but you'd imagine he'd be the perfect player to put into the team. And it kind of like be great to put him in now. Like give him the Cork game, give him the Louth game, 2 games to get up to speed, and then whether it is a quarter-final or you'd imagine a preliminary qualifier round of 12 type game that he'll be involved in against one of the other top sides. So yeah, like I think for Kerry, like they need to maybe test out a few other things. Like we see like the quality, like obviously Gavin White's been injured a little bit and been in and out of the team. Like he'd be a big addition back into the side. And I don't know, like the structure of Kerry's play doesn't seem to be there so far this year. Whether Paddy Tally's taking a back seat, whether they're trying to take a different approach, but they are a lot more vulnerable defensively, and especially in the Mayo game, like they looked very off the pace. Like they were second, to the second balls. They just looked 40 to 50% ever so slightly off the pace, which is not what we've seen from Kerry last year. Like Kerry last year, it was almost just a straight line. They just kept winning. Like other than that Tyrone defeat in the league, they won almost every other game they played. And it wasn't perfect all the time, but usually they'd find an answer. So yeah, I think Kerry will need those players to kick into gear because, as good as David Clifford is, like you look at a lot of other teams around the country who, one top class player will only get you so far. So they need Sean O'Shea, these lads, to kick into gear, and they're more than capable of doing so. And to be fair, I think that they definitely will once more tougher big crunch games come around.
Yeah, it's an interesting part. All right, we'll have to see about Kerry in the next few weeks. And before we leave this game, it's an interesting stat actually. Kerry this season in all competitions have only won 1 away game away from Fitzgerald Stadium or 3, and that was against Clare in the Munster final. So maybe Cork could take confidence for that stat. We'll have to see on Saturday, hopefully from my case, but hopefully not from a Kerry's fans' point of view. But we'll move on to your own county now, Aaron. Kildare against Dublin at 5 o'clock on GAA Go. And Nolan Pairc in Kilkenny. I think this is the second football game to be ever played there in the championship. And coincidentally enough, Dublin played in that too against Laois in 2016. I was watching some of your videos last week against Roscommon, and you were very, very vocal about the Dublin team, and so was Seamus as well, I noticed as well. about Dublin's performance against Roscommon. But before we get into this game in general, I just wanted to ask you about this because, like, I don't normally disagree with you, Aaron, but here I find it kind of hard to agree with you because when you think about it, Roscommon were third in Division 1. Dublin were second in Division 2 as it finished out. Maybe there's just an argument that Roscommon have better players than Dublin, and maybe it wasn't a disgrace as you and Seamus were making it out, or any other Dublin fan. What do you think about that yourself? Do you think Roscommon were kind of disrespected by a few Dublin fans, or do you think Dublin just had a disgraceful performance last Sunday?
I think I don't even think Roscommon played to their best though. That's the funny thing. Like, they missed a lot of chances going down the home stretch. There was moments, I think, in the first half where they kept the ball for 2-3 minutes when they ran at Dublin and created chances. Like, they were more than capable. Like, Dublin were there to be put to bed in the first half, in my opinion. Like, Roscommon could have went 8 or 9 points up at half time. Like, they were 4 points up at half time. It could have been more. Like, that was the thing going into the start. The second half was like, we've played really, really bad, but Roscommon have been good, but they weren't as good as what we've seen from them against Mayo, in my opinion, and weren't as good as what we've seen throughout the league. And obviously, look, it's a big occasion playing in Croke Park. It's something they're not used to, playing Dublin, everything else. Obviously, Dublin with the majority of the fans there. So it was always going to be tough. But I think there was moments in the game where Roscommon didn't play to their best. And I think that combined with Dublin being as poor as they were, I think I think that was what resulted in it being a draw. But I think, like, the reaction probably isn't just because of the Roscommon game. I think it's mostly because of Dublin throughout the entirety of the year. Like, you can see the potential is there. Like, at the start of the second half, I think we scored 1-3 or 1-4 without reply. We pressed up on kickouts. We were turning the ball over. Suddenly start playing good football. And then we switched off completely again and allowed Roscommon back into it. But, like, you see the potential is there when Dublin are on it and when they're playing well. I think there is definitely the argument that Roscommon probably do have better players, but I don't think they were absolutely brilliant themselves on the day. I think they deserve to win the game. I thought they did more to win the match, and they were definitely better than Dublin on the day. But I don't think it was the best version of Roscommon. I think the best version of Roscommon there probably would have beaten Dublin by 6 or 7, in my opinion.
Yeah, interesting point of view there, but we will move on to this game in particular, this Kildare game. How are you set for this game? Like, Kildare, last 2 games have taken you all the way in Croke Park, nonetheless. I think it was a point in the league, 2 points in the championship. So Kildare being, well, we say it's a home venue, but it's not really. It's Nolan Park in Kilkenny. But at the same time, it's a tighter pitch. Kildare take you down there. Do Kildare have a chance?
They definitely do have a chance, all right. They definitely do. Like, when you look at, I suppose, the last 4 games in total, like, I know we have that Leinster final from last year where Dublin blew Kildare away, but the other 3 games were all very competitive, and one of them was a Kildare win in Newbridge in the league in Division 1 in 2022. So, yeah, like, it's one of them where you look at it and think, like, it's hard to know, because if Dublin bring it, and, like, because, like, you do look at Dublin squad, and we should be playing a lot better, in my opinion, than what we are. I know you could argue that some of the players maybe are getting older and regressed ever so slightly, but a lot of them are still quite young, like Mannion, Kieran Kilkenny, like, haven't even hit 30 yet. Costello's still in his mid-20s. Con O'Callaghan's still in his mid-20s. Same with Noel Scully. Sean Bugler is a young enough player. Brian Fenton's still in his mid-20s. So, although the argument is there that maybe Dublin have had the same squad for a long time, a lot of them are still more than capable. Like, fair enough, Dean Rock is maybe the exception. James McCarthy, Mick Fitzsimons, these lads probably are kind of coming to the end of their time, probably in the Dublin team, in fairness, and you can probably see that with some of the rustiness and some of the mistakes that they make. But, like, if Dublin play to their ability and play to their strengths, they're more than capable of putting Kildare away, and putting them away. But the problem is Dublin just don't seem to be bringing that. Like, there seems to be a lacklusterness in the attack and third. Like, we just seem caught between making it almost looks like we're trying to score the perfect score, and we should just let the shackles off a bit and just shoot and play with a bit of freedom. Against Louth, we did that, but I feel like we only did that because we built up a 5 to 6 point lead, and it felt like the game was over, and Louth's heads probably went ever so slightly. So it's hard to know, to be honest, because Kildare are definitely not the best version of Kildare either. Like, like a lot of their best players don't seem to be playing, like whether it's injuries with Jimmy Hoyland, he wasn't involved the last day. I seen Daniel Flynn was an unused substitute. They're relying on the likes of Paddy Woodgate and some other younger players who come in the last couple of seasons, like Neil Flynn doesn't really seem to get a look in either. So you are looking at it and thinking, Kildare, like, they're more than capable of beating Dublin if Dublin aren't at it. But again, Kildare could throw the game away as well. So I don't know what to expect this weekend, to be honest with you. Like, it could be any type of game. I think Dublin should have enough to win, but I don't know, because Dublin, we seem to make life a lot harder for ourselves a lot of the time. Because even in the Roscommon game as well, if you remember, like, we had maybe 2-3 chances to win the game. Like, Dean Rock had a free right in front of the goal, hit short. There was another chance where we hit the post. Like, Dublin had more than enough to win the match, but we just kept messing it up. So you just don't know. Like, Kilkenny, I remember, had another opportunity that dropped short as well. So you don't know what you're going to get with Dublin, to be honest.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, all right. And I think Dublin will pull away as well in the end, but Kildare should definitely put it up to them. But what Kildare team are you kind of expecting from this? Because I know they dropped their players for the Dublin game at the Leinster semi-final. They played defensive tactics, but then in the Leinster final last year, they played man-on-man, which was stupendous, really. And Kildare have the tendency to do that too. So what do you think Kildare's approach will be going to this game? Will they go man-on-man just because it's a tighter pitch, or will they just sit back, do you think, and try and conserve as much as they got?
I think they have to play the same way. Like, I think it's the way of working against Dublin now. Like, Clare did something similar, nearly worked. Roscommon did something. You need to blend it, obviously. You can't just go full-on defensive mode without offering anything in attack. Like, they need to take risks. They need to take chances. Like, I think if Roscommon took a few more risks and a few chances, they could have come away with the victory. And I think Kildare may be the same as well in Croke Park. They need to frustrate Dublin for as long as possible, because the longer the game stays close, the longer the game stays as a 1-point game, a 2-point game in favour of either side, Kildare will grow in confidence. And, you know, I'm hearing they're bringing large numbers of fans to this game. I think they have, like, most of the ticket sales will go to Kildare, because obviously it's supposed to be their home game. So, like, there'll be a huge amount of Kildare fans at this match. And I think they're going to bring the energy, and I think they should sit in. They should play the same way, a zonal type defensive system, because Roscommon, it nearly worked, and Kildare, it nearly worked. I know Louth tried something and then they got blown away, and it can look a little bit silly if you get blown away after 10-15 minutes, but they need to do it, because that's what seems to be working against Dublin at the minute.
Exactly so, and we both think Dublin win, but slightly so in this game. But if Kildare do win it, hopefully, well, if Kildare loses more, so hopefully they won't be complaining about the amber seats in the stands anyway. And hopefully from your case, Aaron, they won't set you on another rant on your channel afterwards. But we'll have to see what happens after that game. But the next game is in Group 2, Westmeath against Galway at 5 o'clock. Westmeath put up an outstanding performance against Armagh, especially in the first half. They almost beat them in the athletic grounds, but you have to expect Galway. They're no top of them. The rankings made by Tommy Rooney on off the ball finally, and they look to be in very good shape going into this game, despite Westmeath looking good themselves last week.
Yeah, I think so. Like, I think the worry for Westmeath is that they put so much into that game versus Armagh. Like, they put so much energy into it, and both mentally and physically, they'll probably be drained ever so slightly coming into this game. Would it be in Cusack Park, like Westmeath at home? Like, maybe it might be a big occasion for the fans, and that might spur them on ever so slightly. But I think it would be tough for Westmeath. Like, Galway are just the masters at the minute at grinding their way through matches. Like, they don't look the best. They look almost like an Ulster team in some ways, and I mean that with respect. Like, with the way they're just grinding teams out. They're battling through matches. Like, physically, they're probably the strongest, toughest team in the country. I think they've got the best defence, and I think attacking-wise, with the likes of Matthew Tierney, Damien Comer, and even if Shane Walsh isn't in the best of form, they have enough players. Like Cathal Sweeney's a great option from the bench, Ian Burke as well. They've got a great squad, great panel, and yeah, I think they'll be far too strong for Westmeath. I think Westmeath put up a good battle against Armagh for large parts. But I think Galway will have full control of this, in my opinion.
They should do, yeah, and it's really tough when Westmeath losing that game, especially to really a long punt by Armagh into the box and Conor Turpin scoring. It was absolutely heartbreaking for them, but it's harsh lesson for them. We didn't, like, I was talking to Seamus last week, and we didn't expect Westmeath to put up a challenge, but fair play to them, they did. And like could Westmeath actually? I know they probably won't win this game against Galway. Like Galway are just boys apart, and we'll talk about Galway as the weeks go on in the championship potentially when they get to the All-Ireland final because they're looking in that stage of form at the moment. But Tyrone, like David Brady said in the past week or so that Westmeath could beat Tyrone or Armagh. They nearly beat Armagh. Could they go on and beat Tyrone in the next few weeks too?
Yeah, like like, I don't know. Like, I mean, it's mad. Like, when he did say that, we all kind of laughed, and then they actually nearly did go and beat Armagh. In fairness, and they probably were the better team, and Armagh probably got out of jail in more ways than one with that victory. Like, the thing with Westmeath is that they do have good players. Like, they do have good footballers in Ronan O'Toole, John Heslin. Like, and I suppose is the point that he was making with the fact they won the Tailteann Cup and there'd be a great bit of energy behind them. I think the problem was that they barely got out of Division 3. Well, they didn't get out of Division 3 at all. Like, they finished mid-table there. And then, obviously, in the Leinster Championship, like, they struggled hugely. Like, obviously, threw a huge lead away against Louth. So, you're looking at, like, Westmeath have good players, but they just haven't quite been at it. And in fairness, like, if they had played like they played against Armagh for the majority of this year, they would have been in Division 2. They would have got promoted, in my opinion, and possibly could have got to a Leinster final as well. So, like, they're more than capable. They've got a great bunch of players, but I think the problem for Westmeath is that, like, Tyrone will probably need to win that match, with the fact they're playing Armagh this weekend, and I think they put so much into the game versus Armagh. Like, it would be very tough. It would be a big surprise to see Westmeath pick up any points in this group moving forward, I think.
They probably would, yeah, and it would be a bit of a stretch if they go on and beat Tyrone, but like, they nearly beat Armagh, so who's to know? And speaking of Tyrone and Armagh, that's the game we're going to talk about next, 7 o'clock live on RT2, and it's a great change that RT are actually televising games on a Saturday. It's the second game they've done all season, with Carlow and Offaly in the Joe McDonagh final being the first of those. So it's great, first of all, that it is being shown in RT. Second of all, this is a game for the ages, really, because both sides hate each other. They'll go for each other's throats, and both are good footballing sides too, so it's going to be a cracker.
Yeah, like, and I suppose the game in the league was a great game, and I think we finished 18-16 in favour of Tyrone. It's a game that both sides sort of need to win, realistically. Like, if Armagh can get a victory here, it will set them up as a, guaranteed in the top two, and then it's a straight shootout between them and Galway on the final day for the first position. So yeah, I think from an Armagh perspective, like, they weren't great versus Westmeath. They didn't play particularly well. I think maybe there was an element of them looking ahead towards Tyrone and looking ahead towards Galway. Like, there is a lot of games, so you do need to manage your body. You do need to manage these games and manage sort of game management. And like, for Armagh, like, we know they'll bring it. Like, going to Tyrone, big rivals. I think both sides will bring a huge amount of energy. I think it could be a bit more scrappy this time with the fact there's so much on the line. How many red cards will be in the match will be interesting. There'll definitely be plenty of scuffles and fights all across the pitch. You'd imagine. Be interesting to see who's the referee actually for this one. But look, yeah, I think Tyrone, like, in fairness to Tyrone, I was impressed with them against Galway. Like, I know they got beat, but they had 14 men for the majority of the game, and I thought they played very well. Like, they battled very hard. Dara Canavan had a great game. Darren McCurry was very good. Tyrone don't have a huge amount of options coming off the bench, and that could be a worry. But I'd probably give them the edge. I think at home, I think if they bring that same energy they brought versus Galway, I fancy them to nick this by 2 or 3 points.
Interesting, very interesting prediction already. And I just looked at the Scorpio app. The referee is Martin McNally from Monaghan, so as neutral as you can get there. He hates probably both pieces, so we'll have to see if he treats them both fairly indeed. But like, Armagh are a very weird one. Like, against Westmeath last day, they were very, very poor. Lucky to come out with the victory at the end. In the Ulster Championship, they, on the other side of it, they actually look good against Cavan, against Antrim, against Down, particularly against Derry. Maybe it was a missed opportunity, but still played pretty well in that game. So do you think Armagh are near enough to one of the most inconsistent teams in the country? Like, Tyrone are nearly up there as well, but when you look at Armagh, they played well in the Ulster Championship. Then against Westmeath, they fall flat on their face and almost lose that game. So, like, they're so inconsistent.
Yeah, they definitely are. Like, and I think like forwards wise, they have a lot of the same type of players, in my opinion. Like Rian O'Neill, Stephen Campbell, Jamar Hall, Rory Grugan. Like, they're all very similar type players. Like, they don't have many creators in their forward line or players who are going to set things up around them, in my opinion. Like Andrew Murnan, I suppose, maybe is one of them. And he had a very good game, actually, in fairness, the last day. But yeah, like, it's, I suppose Armagh, like, they seem to be relying on scraps. Like, they sort of battled their way through the game against Westmeath and throughout the league as well. Like, they were very flat. Like, I don't know, like against Derry, they played very well. Like, I think Armagh have probably just been like saving themselves for these big games and waiting to sort of peak and waiting to sort of click. If they go out and beat Tyrone, like, all will be forgotten for the Westmeath performance, and people will be saying, well, you know, it didn't matter in the end, and maybe they were saving themselves for the trip down to Healy Park for this one. But yeah, like, I think it would be a big game, and I think for Armagh, like, you know, you don't know what version they're going to bring. Like, they could really turn up for this one. They could cause Tyrone a lot of problems, but I think Tyrone, midfield wise, defensively, and even with their forwards as well, I think they will be just a bit too strong, in my opinion, especially at home as well. I just fancy them to ever so slightly nick it, but I think it could be a very close game, and a draw could very well possibly be on the cards here.
Could be a safe bet, all right, at the draw. I haven't even looked at the Paddy Power odds now, but that should be definitely a safe bet if it comes to fruition, definitely. But like, I'll probably predict a Tyrone win at home as well, just slightly. But like, how crucial is this game for Fergal Logan and Brian Dewar? Because I've seen in the past, especially the JMAP podcast, I think Kevin McGorty came up with this point, that it is already their last year, and the Tyrone players just know that automatically. But what do you think yourself? Like, do you think there's pressure on Logan and Dewar to deliver, especially this season? Like, especially after losing to Galway and Monaghan, that's two big games now they've lost in the championship already.
Yeah, like, it's an interesting one because, like, obviously with the fact they won that All-Ireland, like, it was almost like they done what they came in to do. Do you know what I mean? Like, they achieved, like, there was no more that they could achieve in some ways, like, and maybe there's been an era of complacency that's crept into the panel. I think that's reflected with a lot of the players that have left. And Tyrone are probably only one or two more players away from leaving to possibly being, you know, a Division 2 team, in my opinion. So yeah, like, I think it's one of them where if they have a good season, if they get to an All-Ireland semi-final, depending on what happens in a quarter-final or between now and then, you know, they could get kept on. You know, they could stay on. It's not inconceivable that they don't. Like, who's hanging their their hands up to come in? I'm not sure. Maybe Enda McGinley possibly is the one, sort of waiting in the trenches possibly for that job. So it's an interesting one, but it's a huge game for Tyrone, because if Tyrone lose, I'd be very worried about them. Like, lose at home to your big rivals, Armagh. You know, the best they're guaranteed then is third. All the pressure on the Westmeath game, even if they win that, you look at some of the sides who could possibly finish second. It's probably going to be one of Dublin, Roscommon. You're looking at possibly Kerry, some of the other groups as well. Could it be a Derry or a Monaghan? Like, it would be very tough for Tyrone to get to a quarter final if they do finish third. So, like, I think this is the biggest game of their season so far, in my opinion, because if they win it, puts them right on track to get out of the group, possibly in second and get to that quarter final. But if they lose it, even if they beat Westmeath, getting to a quarter final could be very tough. So that's why I think it's the biggest game for Tyrone's season. I don't think it's the biggest game for Armagh's season.
Interesting point, and probably that's why we're both going for Tyrone to win this game in general. And we'll move on to Sunday's games in the All-Ireland Senior Football Championship and the Group 4 game. First of all, Monaghan against Clare, 2 p.m. in Clonus in St. Tiernack's Park. Like, Monaghan played very well the last day against Derry, and in some aspects probably should have came out of Celtic Park with a win. Clare, on the other hand, coming out after a demoralising defeat, really, to Donegal and Ennis. So it's unfortunate for Clare fans, but you'd have to really expect one winner here.
Yeah, I think so. Like, I think for Clare, like, they probably put huge amounts into the league to staying in the league, and obviously that didn't quite work out. They re-galvanised themselves for that win over Cork. I think there is an era of Clare looking a little bit tired, a little bit leggy. I think Clare probably want the season to end now, to be honest with you. think getting to a Munster final was brilliant, but I think that defeat probably took a lot out of them. I think they were hoping, I think everyone was expecting a Kerry win, but I don't think people were expecting that to be as comfortable as it was, and for Clare to be a lot more competitive. So yeah, like, look, for Clare, like they'll try probably sit in, they'll try frustrate Monaghan, play them at their own game, and try and nick something. I don't think it will be maybe as comfortable as what Monaghan or as what Kerry bet Clare, but I think for Monaghan, look, that there is a feel-good factor around Monaghan at the minute. One thing you do see under Vinnie Corey is the consistency in their performances. You know, they've come a long way. The fact that Conor McManus was a late substitute coming on against Derry, and they still were able to play the way that they were. And maybe there's even an argument that they play better without McManus at times. We've seen that at times, even through the league, and maybe, you know, it gives the responsibility to other players, for the likes of Conor McCarthy to step up, for Carl O'Connell to step up. So I think Monaghan will be too strong here. Don't know if McManus will start, but I think regardless, they'll have too much. I think it could be. I think Clare probably had enough to win the game versus Donegal. They missed a lot of chances. I think Monaghan will be a bit more comfortable than Donegal were in that game. I think that the scoreline probably doesn't reflect how that match was between Clare and Donegal, but I think Monaghan could win by 4 or 5. But I think it will be a comfortable 4 or 5 point victory.
It should be, and especially with Conor McManus being on the bench. I think Jack McCarron was on the bench as well last weekend. Correct me if I'm wrong now, but that's some amount of pool of talent that Monaghan have, and they should easily win that game. We'll obviously get on to Donegal and Derry in a bit, but we're both predicting a Monaghan win for that game. And another game where it's unfortunate for Louth, really, after the loss against Cork last weekend. I was at that game in Pairc Tailteann, and it was a great win for Cork, very morale boosting for them. But for Louth, that was the game they were going to target, and now they're going to this game against Mayo in Castlebar, 2 p.m. live on RT2 on Sunday. Really demoralised after that. Like Samuel Roy, very good performance the last day, and he was even signing autographs for kids at the end, which is a great gesture from him in fairness. So I thought he'd be more devastated than he was. But Mayo looks good against Kerry, and they look to be firing at the moment. But Seamus Brady and Sinead Farrell actually on Play on J earlier on today, I watched that, and they made a very good point. Mayo could perform very well against Kerry one day, or Dublin, or Galway, or whoever, and then Louth or Derry back in 2017, or Cork could come up against them and then give a game to them. So Mayo could be inconsistent that way. But do you think there's kind of a different mentality with Kevin McStay there, or do you think Louth could seriously put up a test?
Yeah, like I think there is a different mentality around Mayo. Like you look at how they treated the league, and there was no flatness in their performances. Like I do understand it to a certain extent, like because Mayo are effectively like they should win the group now. Like there should be no slip-ups against Louth, and there should be no slip-ups against Cork. And on paper, it should be 2 comfortable wins. Like Cork maybe could cause a few problems with it being a neutral game. Cork could still have a good bit to play for, in fairness, going into that match. So like there is an element where Mayo could switch off, and their heads now could probably start preparing for an All-Ireland quarter-final, and they could start thinking towards that. But I think the thing with Mayo is that they have a very, very good squad and a very good panel. Like they could take out players, like they could take out Jack Carney, Kevin McLaughlin could come in, they could rotate their midfield, Padraig O'Hara could maybe come in now and play, wing back or in a cornerback. They could change their goalkeeper, maybe Robbie Henley gets a run out here. Forwards-wise, they've just got a huge amount of options. Like Jason Doherty could come into the team. They could rest James Carr. They've got a very, very good panel and a very good squad. And I think even if Mayo rotate ever so slightly and make a few changes, I think their core players will still play. Like Aidan O'Shea will still play. Paddy Durkin might start this time around. But I think they'll just have too much. I think Louth are probably in a similar boat to Clare, where they probably want the season to end now, to be honest. Getting to a Leinster final, played as well as they did in the league, was very good. But to see Louth get anything from Mayo and Kerry would just be very sort of wishful thinking, to be honest. And look, the Louth will set up the way they set up. They'll sit in, they'll try and frustrate Mayo, they'll try and keep the game, keep the score down. But the problem is Louth probably need to win as well. And I think that's the issue. So I think Mayo will be too strong.
Should be too strong, definitely. And Mayo are definitely All-Ireland contenders for this. But before we leave this game, actually, a Louth fan came up to the Cork fans, including myself, after the game and saying, we'll do our job and beat Mayo. You do your job and beat Kerry, and we can both go into the top two. Maybe a bit wishful thinking there, but the Louth fans are still confident. They were still buoyant after the defeat to Cork. So, like, could that confidence maybe translate onto the pitch? Because it seems to be a feel-good factor around Louth, despite the loss against Cork last week.
Yeah, I think Louth, like it was the same. Even speaking to Louth fans, you know, in the pub after the Dublin match, like I think Louth fans are just very happy to be back in this conversation, to be here. You know, a couple of years ago, Louth were, you could argue Louth are one of the worst teams in the country. Do you know what I mean? And now they're playing in the All Ireland Championship. They're in Group 3. Like there's a, you know, Mickey Hart is bringing in younger players like Darragh McConnon. I think McKeown as well was another one as well who look good versus Offaly. Like they're bringing in young players, and there's a feel good factor around Louth. And like regardless of what happens against Mayo or Kerry, they've had a great season. Like even if they get hammered in both matches, they've had a brilliant season. So like they've nothing to fear. You know, they'll sit in. If Mayo aren't at the races, Louth will grow in confidence, and Louth won't go away. Like you definitely won't put them away easily. But I just think, you know, if Mayo start strong and go 5-6 points up early on, the floodgates could open, because Louth do need to win. In fairness, like a defeat is going to do them no good. And Mickey Hart is a competitor. He'll want to try his best to get out of the group. But yeah, I just think Mayo will have too much here.
Yeah, I think so as well. But obviously, we'll Louth all the best of luck, because their fans were absolutely brilliant. And Partalton last week, Samuel Roy is an outstanding footballer. So I obviously wish Louth all the best, and I'm sure Aaron does as well. But we'll move on to the next game now. Roscommon against Sligo in Dublin, and Kildare's group in Group 3, 3 o'clock in Dr. Hyde Park on Sunday, live on GAA Go. Like, it's a Connacht rivalry, but at the same time, like, I know Sligo put up a very, very good performance against Kildare, getting that late point from David Quinn. Niall Murphy was inspired performance, scoring 6 points the last day. But Roscommon, Kieran Murtagh got Player of the Week last week officially for the GAA. Dermot Murtagh, Conor Cox coming off the bench, Donny Smith's a good player, Enda Smith. Like, Roscommon should have too much for Sligo here, unfortunately, for the 8th county.
Yeah, I think so. Like, I do have a feeling Sligo might put it up to Roscommon, and I think this might be a closer game than people think. Like, I think this might be maybe only a 2 or 3 point victory, possibly even less. I think Roscommon would have put so much into the Dublin game, and I think Roscommon might, you know, their heads might start thinking now already towards possibly getting out of this group, and then possibly towards the Kildare game, because this game at home, it just feels like a foregone conclusion. And I think when you have games like that, there's always the possible for an upset. And Sligo, like, they'll come in confident, like, especially after getting a draw versus Kildare. You know, unlike, as we said, with Louth and Clare, where I think their seasons are, you know, more or less over because it's going to be tough for them. I think Sligo still have a lot to play for. Like, if they can put up a performance here, even a 2-3 point defeat gives them a huge chance going into the final day against Dublin. And I think Sligo have got good players. Some of the under 20 lads are now coming into the side. I seen the last day versus Kildare. Good forwards like Niall Murphy and Sean Caraboyne. I think Sligo will cause Roscommon a couple of problems here, but I think all in all, like, you would fancy Roscommon. Like, with Davy Burke, we know what they're going to bring. It'll be a different game for Roscommon, because Roscommon are kind of used to being the underdog. They're used to being this, and we've seen them through the league and through the Connacht Championship, like, sit in, be defensive, try and hit teams on the counter-attack, you know, keep the ball for large parts and break with pace. Sligo are probably going to be the team that does that in this one, and they're going to invite Roscommon onto them. So it might be a little bit of an unusual game for Roscommon, but I do think all in all, with their quality, with the players that they have, with the form of the Murtaghs, I think they'll be too strong.
Yeah, you'd have to expect Roscommon to win despite Sligo's confidence. But the comment coming in here, especially about the games involving Westmeath, Galway, and Roscommon, Sligo, Cork, Kerry, all them, the media have the Division 1 teams as unbeatable. There'll be a surprise at some stage. Will it be this weekend, possibly? You know, so...
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, there has been a lot of shocks and surprises in the championship this year. There definitely has been, like, and, you know, especially in hurling as well. There seems to be a surprise every weekend. And like, you're looking at it, like, I think you could look at Donegal, Derry, I know we'll get onto that. I think that could be the surprise, to be honest with you. But you do look at it, and I don't know, it's just Westmeath, Galway, like Mayo, Louth. It's very hard to see those sides not winning, but I don't know. Like, it does seem to be a strange year in the football championship this year, and we've seen a lot of shocks already. So it's definitely not inconceivable.
Definitely not. No, hopefully, from my point of view, Cork beat Kerry, then that'll be the surprise of the weekend, but we'll have to see.
Yeah.
What at the weekend. And Donegal and Derry, you mentioned that as being one of the surprises. And cue the madness here. That's the game we're going on to next. Donegal against Derry in Ballybuffet, 4 p.m. on RT2. You said about Donegal earlier on, I'm going to ask you this because you said it about Clare earlier on, that Donegal weren't much better than Clare, or 5 points better than Clare in a way.
Mhm.
Do you still think that now? Like, do you think Donegal actually didn't get the credit they deserve? Because I looked at the highlights of that game and a few match reports. Kieran Thompson scored 4 points. Oisin Gallen got 4 points. Owen Ball Gallagher was excellent at centre back. So, for a team that had a dreadful year up until the Clare game, do you think Donegal needed a lot more credit than what they were getting for that performance in Ennis?
I think they do deserve credit for getting the victory, for showing the resolve towards the end of the game. But I remember seeing the highlights on the Sunday game as well. And I think Clare, correct me if I'm wrong, were maybe 4 or 5 points to 0 up at one stage in the first half and started really strong. So I think Clare allowed Donegal back into it. I think Donegal were there, like the vulnerability around Donegal football at the minute. They were there for the taking. Do you know what I mean? They were there in that first half. We've seen what Down did to them. We've seen what happened in the league. I think Clare missed a lot of chances. They missed goal chances. They sort of faded throughout the game. And Donegal, like, only started to grow into the game probably in the last 20 minutes. And I think, like, with Donegal, when you look at the players that they have, like, it's not like it's not like they have bad players. Like, they were in an Ulster final last year. I know they're missing Paddy McBrearty, and obviously Michael Murphy stepped away. A few other players have left the team, changing management and maybe a bit of turmoil behind the scenes. But, like, they do have good players. Kieran Thompson, Oisin Gallen, Caleb McGonigal, like, good players. Like, these were players that were part of Donegal when they were winning Ulster titles not so long ago, when they were bidding for 3 in a row against Cavan. So, those players don't become bad overnight. But I think what happens is, the mentality, a bad mentality can creep into the mindset of players. You don't track back. You don't have the belief. You miss chances that you should be scoring. Preparation isn't right in training. And I think that all seeps through. And that's effectively what results in bad games with good players. I think it's similar with Dublin to a certain extent, with how they have great players, in my opinion, on paper, but they aren't performing. So I think that's what's happening with Donegal. But I think at home in Ballybuffet is always a tough place to go. Derry, Derry have gone very strong all year. And I think an upset could be on the cards here.
Maybe so, because you look at Derry's last 2 games, like, they scored under 15 points at both of them, against Armagh and against Monaghan. And Monaghan could have easily beaten them. And I looked at scores in that game. McGuigan got 9 points out of Derry's 14. So, do you think that there's a missing link in Derry at the moment? Like, last 2 games, they looked very poor, whereas the game against Monaghan right before that goes to semi-final, they looked outstanding. They got a 70% shot accuracy or something like that. So, like, Derry look good then, but now they look like they could be got at. So, is that even more of a reason to think that Donegal could provide a shock here?
I think so. Like, I think there is far too much of a reliance on Shane McGuigan. I think he probably has been the best player in the country so far this year. Like, he's up there, I think, with Matthew Tierney, Aidan O'Shea, as players who very much been in the conversation. Like, when I think of Derry and I think outside of Shane McGuigan, like, there aren't too many forwards who sort of jump out. Do you know what I mean? Like, there isn't too many. Like, you've got, obviously the Cassidy brothers, you've got Benny Heron in there. Lakeland Murray looks like a good up-and-coming player, but there's not a huge amount of quality forwards in the Derry side. Like, we were talking about Armagh having sort of a lot of silky, styly kind of footballers. Derry are almost sort of the opposite, where they have Shane McGuigan, who is a forward like that, a marquee type forward. But then a lot of their other players are just very sort of, they're runners, they'll run off the ball, they're more of a goal threat type team. So they don't, Conor Glass as well sort of has been playing consistently throughout the entirety of the year. I think the season might possibly have caught up with them, and maybe everything that's gone on behind the scenes, the change in management with Kieran Mina coming in, obviously there's rumours maybe that Gallagher still has some sort of an influence on the tactics of the way Derry play. Like, I don't know if that's true or not, but, like, you would look at it and think, there might be a drop-off with Derry. There might just be an ever so slight drop-off this year. And Donegal at home in Ballybuffet, they'll want revenge for that Ulster final last year. I'd still fancy Derry maybe to nick it, but I think a draw, possibly a 1-point win for Donegal. Like, if Donegal won the game, I wouldn't be surprised, to be honest.
Yeah, I wouldn't be either. When you look at Donegal's performance, especially Bon Gallagher, Kieran Thompson, Like, I don't know, is Langan could come back into the team in this game? Conor O'Donnell looked pretty good in the league in patches. Quayle McGonigal, as you mentioned there, is very good in midfield. Sean Patton's good in goal. So Donegal still have the players to trouble Derry. And maybe that's something Kieran Mina has to take into account as well, that you can't just go into games expecting to win now. They still have to work very hard. And I don't know, is this a bit mean from me on a Derry point of view, but to me, it looked like in the Monaghan game, they went into it thinking this could be an easy win. Look at the Ulster semi-final. We absolutely pulverised them in the Ulster semi-final. And they might have gone into the game thinking, we're too good for Monaghan and we might sit back here or something like that. What do you think about that yourself? Do you think Derry are kind of, laxing a small bit because of that? Because they think they're better than some teams?
Yeah, I don't even know. Maybe ever so slightly. Like, I don't know. Like, I think Derry's main primary objectives, I think probably at the start of the year, was probably to obviously get out of the league and win Ulster. I think they were their two main focuses. They've achieved both of them. The All-Ireland was definitely a focus, but it's just hard to know. Like, it's hard to know whether under the new management, whether the intensity that Gallagher brought is the same that Kieran Mina brings. We just don't know. Like, and we don't know what kind of changes there's been maybe behind the scenes. So it's hard to know, like, but I think the thing we do know with Derry is that they went full tilt throughout the league. They played their strongest players in games that they didn't even need to play them in. And I think that does have an effect on a team. Like, for some of those players, like, this is probably their 13th, 14th game of the year, give or take. That takes a toll. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's a long time. And a lot of those players are playing club football as well. So I think the energy levels are bound to possibly drop, and maybe Donegal could capitalise on it.
Thinking back as well, I think Conor Glass, Conor McCuckian and all them for the Watty Graham's Glen through the Otter days. Well, they played in the All-Ireland final one week and then they played Limerick in the next week and they absolutely pulverised Limerick regardless. So they probably didn't need to play that game. And yeah, I think it could come back to bite them as well, but they probably should beat Donegal, but don't be surprised if Donegal put up a very good performance like they did against Clare last time out. And we will move on to the Tailteann Cup. This is the final round of games in that competition this weekend. That will start off with the game televised on GAA Go, and that is Meath against Down at 1 o'clock on Saturday. It's in part of the Pairc in your own county, Dublin. So it probably doesn't have much meaning, this game, but it's still intriguing in a way, if you get me, because Meath and Down are probably two sides of the similar trajectory. Down are Division 3 at the moment, Meath are at bottom level of Division 2, but a lot of people thinking Down could, come up against Meath and beat them. When you look at the confidence there in the Down panel at the moment with Conor Laverty over them, whereas Meath, yes, they beat Tipperary and Waterford in the last two games, but they haven't scored more scores than their opposition above Division 3 level. That's kind of shocking. Only Carlow, Waterford and Tip, they've done it against it. They're all Division 4 sides. So, there's still an opportunity for Down to get the confidence boost even more and beat Meath this Saturday.
Yeah, I think so. Like, I definitely fancy Down for this game. And as you said, in Parnell Park, like, as I was saying to you off air, thinking of possibly going to this game with the fact it's 1 o'clock, obviously, on Saturday. It's a good time to go to a match as well. But yeah, no, like, I think Down will be way too strong, to be honest with you. I think they could probably beat Meath quite comfortably. Like, I think Meath, it's hard to know what Meath, like, they just, like, because I think maybe it is both sides in a similar trajectory in terms of the competition, but I think Down are definitely a team that are on the up, and you could argue Meath are definitely a side that have sort of hit rock bottom, with that defeat to Offaly, and they're trying to raise themselves up. And I suppose the last two games were probably great for me because Cormac could make a lot of changes, try out different players. Aaron Lynch maybe looks like a good player to come into the side. And O'Rourke is possibly learning on the job a little bit, ever so slightly as well. So I think it'd be interesting to see. Like, I think Meath need to start strong, start fast, but I'd be curious if Down go 4 or 5 points up early on in the first half, it could be tough for Meath to withstand that and sort of turn it around from there. So I do think Down will be too strong.
Yeah, I'll probably go Down as well. Maybe under 5 points, but I still think it'll be a tight game because there's still confidence back, as you mentioned, with O'Rourke and Meath. But we'll see what happens. And the winner goes straight through to the quarterfinals. So maybe there is bits to play for in that. And another fixture where the winner goes straight through to the quarterfinal is Cavan against Offaly in Pairc in Longford at 3 o'clock. Like, interesting game this, because Cavan won the last 2 against London and Laois. Offaly beat London quite comprehensively, but then drew against Laois after making a comeback from 6 points down. So, like, this is still a tight game. Offaly performed well in the Leinster semi-final against Louth. Cavan are probably favourites for this competition. Let's set the record straight here. So you'd probably expect Cavan to win it, but at the same time, Offaly could put up a challenge.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I actually fancy Offaly just to upset Cavan ever so slightly. I think Cavan, like, their job is basically done. Like, they've won their 2 games. I think focus will turn towards the next round. I know they're not guaranteed to finish first. Like, if they lose, that'll be them outside of first and into second. But I think Offaly, like, I think they did rotate ever so slightly against Laois. I think maybe they just took their eye off the ball. I think Laois, are one of those sides as well that do have good, decent players. They just can't seem to consistently find the standard that Laois football probably needs. And I do fancy them. I think Cian Farrell, brilliant footballer. Some of the other new lads who've come in, some of the under-20 lads that have come back into the side, look like good players. So I fancy Offaly. Like, Cavan do have blips in them. We've seen it throughout the year. They have the odd blip in them. They tend to take their eye off the ball every now and again. And I think, Cavan might still go on to win the championship or win the competition, but I think this is a game where Offaly might ever so slightly catch them out and nick it by a couple of points.
Jeez, you heard it here first. And I'm not sure anybody else would say Offaly to beat Cavan here, but yeah, it's hard to go against Cavan when I know James Smith, as John McMahon announced earlier on the week, he's out of the panel completely now, but they still have very good players like Paddy Lynch, Darrell McKiernan, and you'd have to expect they'll be buoyed to try get top of the group. So it's still go for Cavan, but Offaly wouldn't be surprised if they get it either. But Aaron predicted it right there that Offaly would win the game. But we'll go on to the Tailteann Cup best for rest section, and we'll start off with this quick roundup on Saturday's games. Tipperary against Waterford, 1 p.m. This is the curtain raiser to the Cork and Kerry game at Pairc Keefe. And I would tell you this for a fact. I think you can hear the gates rattling, the cans rolling, and no one will hardly be at this game. So, and as GAA League Table said on Twitter earlier on the week, even a win for either of these two sides might not guarantee progression into the knockout stage because of New York being there and because of their dreadful point difference at the moment with Tipperary and Waterford there. So, but then again, who do you expect to win this, Tipperary or Waterford, or maybe even a draw, which would knock both sides out?
Yeah, I'd actually tip Waterford to win this game. I think Tipperary, like, there's been a lot of change in that team in the last sort of year or so. Like, I was hearing there's more players that have left the panel. I think, unfortunately, like, that era for Tipperary is over. It is over, unfortunately. Like, look, if Conor Sweeney be back hopefully next year, maybe if Mickey Quinlivan was to commit, you would say, all right, they've got 2 very good forwards there. That might be enough to get them out of Division 4. But, is Quinlivan going to commit? How many more years is Sweeney going to give it, especially after a big injury? So, yeah, I fancy Waterford. Look, Waterford, to be fair, they led early on against Down. They played all right. They actually kind of had some good moments against Meath. And I was looking at that game in Scorpio, and I was thinking, geez, Waterford might actually do something here. I know Meath heavily rotated, but it wasn't a hammering. It wasn't a complete annihilation. And Waterford have probably had a similar sort of squad for the last couple of seasons, like Conor Murray, Jason Curry, Dara Corcoran. They have a lot of the same players for the last while, and I think they'll get the reward and get the victory. Whether it's enough to get them out of the group, I don't know, but I fancy Waterford to do the job.
Coincidentally enough, I actually predicted Waterford to win this game as well on the GMA podcast earlier on the weekend. Funnily enough, I predicted Waterford to win in the Munster Championship. They didn't do so, so I'll go over it again. I'll say Waterford will win this and see what happens. But the next game after that is the second game at Pairc. As you mentioned, you go to the first game. Second game, maybe not so. Laois against London at 3 o'clock. But Laois seem to be, like, I think Laois have a bit too much criticism towards them, because I looked at them against Cavan, Mark Barry, they've very good forwards anyway. My brain's gone blank. Even O'Carroll, that's the other forward I was thinking of. London, 2 games. They look pretty out of their depth in both games. And one thing I will say about this game, I'm surprised it's on at Pairc, and really, really surprised this game isn't held in a submarine beneath the sea or something like that. Because that would have been the complete neutral game between these two sides. But Laois should win it, jokes aside.
Yeah, like I think Parnell Park was probably the only place you could have it, unless maybe you rented out Anfield maybe for the week or something like that, and brought the Laois lads over. I think maybe you should have just given London the 2 home matches. Why not just give them 2 home games? In fairness, but yeah, as you said there, like I mean, Laois is an interesting one. Like as you said, like they have some kind of tidy forwards, and as you said, and Mark Barry and Evan O'Carroll, Paul Kingston, Kieran Lillis as well. Like they have a few good footballers. Like I think with Laois, there's just been a bit of change, and obviously Billy Sheehan's been there a couple of years now. You looked at Laois throughout the league, and I think the problem with Laois is that when they go 4 or 5 points down, the shackles come off and they just can get absolutely hammered and beaten from pillar to post. But when Laois are on it, like when they play well, like they do have good players, and they have players that can hurt you. They got a goal. They're the only team to get a goal against Dublin in the championship this year. Maybe as bad as what we were saying about Dublin, but they did get a goal against them, in fairness. Got 2 goals against them, actually, I think. So, look, Laois do have ways to hurt teams. I just think defensively, very exposed. But as you said there, they'll beat London. And, if Offaly were to get beat by Cavan, let's say, it would come down to score difference. So I think Laois, they'll be gunning to beat London, but I think they'll be gunning to absolutely, beat them from pillar to post. And I think, to be honest with you, that's something that might happen. I'd probably go Laois by 9 or 10. I think London, like it's our last game of the year. I think, realistically, those lads want to play that game and come on. I think they'll be coming over to Dublin to probably for the trip and for the pub afterwards. I don't think they'll really have much interest in the game.
Probably not. And yeah, they should win this game easily. And speaking of a bit of dead rubbers, this is a complete dead rubber. The next game, Limerick against Wicklow in Port Laois at 1 o'clock. Wicklow are guaranteed to be bottom of the table, out of the Tailteann Cup. Limerick are guaranteed to be top, out into the quarterfinals. Probably doesn't matter the result, but Limerick should win the game just to get maybe the confidence up for the quarterfinals.
Yeah, I think so. Like I think for Limerick, like obviously there'd been change in management, so it's almost like it's been a new season. The Tailteann Cup, it's like a new mentality, new sort of thought process. Obviously, since Ray Dempsey stepped away. So yeah, I think this is probably just a game for Limerick where they, maybe they might rotate ever so slightly, try out different players. I think Wicklow, like, it's probably a case of, Oshie McConville, they put too much energy in the league, huge amount of, I think their main focus was get out of the league, get out of Division 4. They did that. Disappointed that they haven't sort of gone, more better in the Tailteann Cup. Like, I think this is an opportunity more than capable for Wicklow to possibly get to a quarterfinal or semi-final, considering how well they looked in the league. But it just hasn't quite worked out. Like, I think Kevin Quinn is injured. He's obviously a huge loss. So, yeah, I'd fancy, I don't know, it's a tough one. I'd probably fancy Limerick ever so slightly. But now that I think that Limerick might rotate, I'll go for a draw. We'll go for the even Steven result. I think Wicklow will want to finish on a high note, but I think Limerick might edge it. But I suppose Oshie McConville, it will, he can go to his punditry then after this, so he'll be happy.
Exactly. He'll get the money in the pocket. That's all that matters for Oshie, definitely. But we'll move on to the other game in Port Laois, and it's another game from the same group, Longford against Carlow at 3 p.m. The situation is here, a draw would be enough for Longford to finish second in the group. Both sides are through to the preliminary quarterfinal, whatever happens indeed. But just to get a better draw out of it, Longford have to win or draw, Carlow have to win. So, is there an incentive to win this game for either of these two sides? And who do you think will win it? For me, I'd probably go for Longford, but what do you think?
Yeah, probably edge towards Longford as well. Like, it feels like it's the first time that things seem to be going right for Paddy Christie and Longford. And I think it is fair, like the Tailteann Cup, like this is what this brings. If Longford, if their season ended after the Leinster Championship and a qualifier defeat, there'd be a lot of negativity. But, at least the Tailteann Cup, it does bring a chance for teams to set the record straight, turn their season around and sort of end on a high note. And fairness to Longford, like they played very well against Limerick, unlucky not to win that. Very good victory versus Wicklow, very comfortable victory, and considering Wicklow had beaten Longford out the gate earlier in the year as well. So, in the Leinster Championship. So, yeah, I think this is a big opportunity for Longford, and I fancy them to take it and win it by 2 or 3.
Yeah, probably go with Longford as well, and they'll probably get an easier draw in the preliminary quarterfinals. And this is the next game for Manna against Antrim in Group 4 is an opportunity to get straight through to the quarterfinals. Antrim have won 2 games. Fermanagh have won 1 game and drawn the other against Wexford. Fermanagh have to win this to top the group. Antrim, well, a draw is enough for them. This game is held at the Box at Athletic Grounds in Armagh. So you'd have to expect Fermanagh, given the talent they have, to win the game. But Antrim's confidence seems to be on the up after winning the last 2 games.
Absolutely, yeah, and you have to give credit to Andy McEntee. Like I think a lot of people looked at it, you know, when Enda McGinley stepped away, and because you look at Antrim and you look at the players and the squad and quality that they have, you know, on paper, like especially with players who've stepped away in the last couple of years, you wouldn't look at Antrim as being a type of team that have done as well as they have. But I think Andy McEntee deserves a huge amount of credit, keeping Antrim in Division 3 and you know, now even in the Tailteann Cup as well, like, you know, to win the 2 games, it's a huge victory. Like playing Fermanagh in the Athletic Grounds, it will be tough. It will be tough for them. You know, Fermanagh need to win the game as well, just depending on what happens elsewhere. So I think the motives will be higher for Fermanagh, in my opinion, and I would fancy them. I think Sean Quigley's back from injury now as well. Ulton Kelm, you know, Ryan Lyons looks like a good, decent footballer as well. I think he scored 1-5 the last day. So I'd fancy Fermanagh to edge it by 3 or 4. But again, Antrim will still go through, and they'll still be a side to fear going into the knockout stages.
They definitely will, yeah. And the other game, this to decide who goes through to the knockout stages and who goes out. Wexford against Leitrim at 3 o'clock in Pairc. So Pairc's getting a lot of use out of the weekend hour. That's 3 games now being held in Pairc, and not one of them being the Dublin football. So maybe the GAA need to look into that even more. But Wexford against Leitrim. Situation here, Wexford are on 1 point, Leitrim are on 0. Leitrim have to win. Wexford, a draw would be enough for them. Like, given that Wexford and given Leitrim's, you know, confidence being derailed after the New York game and a lot of people wanting Andy Moore to leave, you'd have to expect Wexford to go on and win this game.
Yeah, like I think there's probably been more championship games in Parnell Park this weekend than there probably has in the last 20 years in football. But in fairness, yeah, like I think another game on the doorstep. Whether I go to this one, I don't know. But yeah, like I think Leitrim. I think Leitrim, to be honest with you, I think they need a result. They need a victory. I think regardless of what happens, you know, regardless of what happens in terms of whether they finish 3rd or not, I think for Andy Moore and for Leitrim, like they need a performance and they need a big victory because like they're more than capable. You know, if this was a game at the start of the Tailteann Cup, you would fancy Leitrim to get the victory. You would, given the fact that, you know, they got out of Division, or well, they didn't get out of Division 3, obviously, but they were more, you know, very close to getting out of Division 3. And I think for Andy Moore, and like, you know, if they lose this and it's a disappointing defeat, you could argue there might maybe be a change in management and there might maybe be a change on the cards. But, you know, I fancy Leitrim. I think Wexford are inconsistent at the best of times. Wexford will raise the standard when they play teams above them, you know, and I think this is a game where Wexford will probably be caught cold. So I fancy Leitrim to get the victory. I'd say by 3.
Jesus, interesting there. You're going for the interesting predictions tonight. I'd probably have to go for Wexford, to be honest with you. Like, Leitrim's confidence is nearly on the floor, and yeah, I think Wexford are making good strides under John Haggerty, but we'll have to see what happens. And before we end the podcast, we'll go on to hurling just briefly. We won't talk about Christy Ring, Laurie Maher, and Dickie Rackard. That's there's previews on my page about those games, so if you haven't checked it out, do so right now. But we'll talk about the underage hurling this weekend. Cork against Offaly in Thurles, Sunday 3 p.m. on Takey Car. It is the under-20 final, and both sides have had a long road. Cork have won all their games in the Munster Championship. They make it this far. Offaly have done the same in Leinster, and in fairness to the quarterfinals, they beat from quarterfinals onwards. They beat Galway, Dublin, and Wexford to make it through. So all the big sides other than Kilkenny, so fully deserved for Offaly to get through. Offaly have been outstanding. Like Adam Screeney's been an absolute brilliant form. Charlie Mitchell's been very good. Shane Rigby, of course, Dan Ravenhill. That's mostly the minor team from last season. And when you consider they're 18-year-olds being under 20, it's incredible. But for Cork, Ben Cunningham from St. Finbar is absolutely incredible at the moment with 244 in the championship so far. Dermot Healy and Colin Walsh doing well for Cork as well. And of course, Ben O'Connor's the manager. Owen Downey is doing well, obviously with seniors and with the under-20s as well. Brilliant that he's allowed to play in this game. So should be a cracker.
Yeah, it definitely should be all right. Like, I think, as you said there, like, I mean, for Offaly, it's been a fantastic rise, obviously, the last sort of couple of years, at underage level. You think of the footballers as well and the underage that they've had. But yeah, no, I think Adam Screeney looks like a great player. Charlie Mitchell as well. Like, I watched him against Dublin in the Leinster semi-final and had a very good game, scored 1-7 or maybe 1-8 or 1-9 or something like that. But yeah, like, I think Offaly are coming in strong. Cork, as you said, it's they're not short of underage success. They're not short of being in this position. They've been in this position, more than once. And as you said, Ben Cunningham looks like a fantastic young hurler. And to get through Munster, like, Munster's generally sort of where the All-Ireland comes from. Do you know what I mean? In the last couple of years, it's generally where it's sort of been. I know Kilkenny won it last year, but yeah, so I'd probably look at Cork as the ever so slight favourites. But, Offaly, especially as you said, a lot of those lads are 18-year-olds. So, Offaly might win the under-20 All-Ireland this year, but they could very well win it next year.
Maybe so, yeah. It's going to be a very, very interesting game. And war point to go as well that the only West Cork fella involved in the Cork panel from the Southern Star recent weeks is Sean Daly, his cornerback, and he's from Randalogue. So if Cork win the All-Ireland, that'll be the first All-Ireland winner for that particular club. So best of luck to him and all of Randalogue and Cork as well. But obviously, best of luck to Offaly as well in this final. I'd probably have to go for Cork to win the game. Winning all the games in Munster, like, that's a very hard thing to do. And Cork have done that, and fair play to Ben O'Connor and his side for that. We'll move on to the minor game. That's the Curtin Razor and Thurles on Sunday at 1 o'clock. Clare against Galway in Thurles, obviously on TG Carr. Interesting game. This, like, Clare didn't win every game in Munster, and specifically they lost one game against Limerick. They went back in the Munster semi-final and won that. They beat Cork in the final. They didn't beat Kilkenny by 8 points in the semi-final. Galway have been in outstanding form after winning their first Leinster title by the influence of Aaron Nyland. I'm not sure is he related to Evan. Someone might correct me now in the comments. He's a very, very good hurler. I haven't checked his scoring stats as of now. I'm trying to do that now, but what an incredible hurler he is. They've won their first Leinster title. They won every game. They trounced Cork in the semi-final as well. So, like the under-20, this has the prospect of being an interesting encounter too.
Absolutely, yeah. Even looking at it from a Clare perspective, like, what a comfortable result it was for them, obviously against Kilkenny. Beating them quite comfortably. James Hegarty looks like a great player there. And I suppose for Galway, Galway at minor level, I suppose they were winning minor championships for fun year after year for a long time there, and this could very well be another one. And yeah, like, even Jonah Donlan, like, he's a family friend, so, like, wish the best for him. He's obviously on the minor panel on the bench the last couple of games, so hopefully he gets an appearance. So yeah, big up to Galway. Like, I hope they can do it. And it's mad. Like, I remember a couple of years ago, Clare, where I think they were absolutely trashed by, I think it might have been Cork in the minor championship. And I remember people were saying, Clare are one of the worst run counties and everything else. And where are Clare at in terms of their underage? But look, Clare are very well run. Footballers at senior level, under 20 level, the hurlers as well, getting to an under 20 All-Ireland semi-final or the Munster under 20 final. So, like, I think Clare are doing a lot of things right. But I'd probably edge towards Galway to nick this one by 2, I think.
It's probably because you have a family member on the Galway team. That's probably why you're going for Galway to win it, to be honest.
Yeah, that's it. You gotta rep your own. So yeah.
Have to definitely. And Galway beat Cork, and that's semi-final 318 to 110. So Galway look impressive, very impressive indeed. 220 to 14 against Kilkenny in the Leinster final as well. So Galway are putting up huge scores. Aaron Nyland, and I've seen the scoring stats though, 4 goals and 64 points in 6 games. I've thought a lot about this guy, and I don't know, is he related to Evan? I'll have to look it up afterwards, but this guy seems to be an incredible player. Jason Rabbit as well, and Brian Cannon, and of course Jonah Donlan as well, your relative. So yeah, Galway seem to have a good panel there, and you have to expect Galway to win it, but nevertheless, Clare have had an outstanding year too. And even if they don't win, Like, it's been a brilliant year for them all round. It's senior, minor, under 20, whatever. They reached the Munster under 20 final as well, so well done to Clare and all them. But yeah, thanks for tuning in to anybody who did. Leave the video a like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Follow GAA Statsman, and of course follow Aaron on Instagram, YouTube. I'm sure you're on 4,000, just past 4,000 subscribers, so congratulations to you on YouTube. So thanks for coming on again, Aaron, and best luck for the weekend, especially for Dublin, and hopefully there won't be a rant about the Kildare amber seats or anything like that, or the grass in particular.
Yeah, hopefully not. Hopefully we're just talking about the football, and yeah, hopefully it's a nice evening in Kilkenny. But yeah, cheers very much for having me on, and best of luck. Hopefully you can beat Kerry as well. That'd be great.